Happy, year. Not very new, is it? It's nearly Valentine's Day. Well, a year did happen, and as they usually do, things happened in it. We had some cancellations, a few game delays, someone beat Tetris. The Fallout show showed that being a video game show doesn't mean you have to hide the fact that you're a video game show. Arcane Season 2 proved that pretending not to be a video game show works pretty well too. We had an unbelievable amount of layoffs this year. The studio behind Hi-Fi Rush was shut down and then revived a couple months later. Spectre Divide released and then died a couple months later. Overwatch 2's PvE officially got cancelled in March, making the 2 in Overwatch 2 just as cosmetic as the changes in it. Nintendo released an alarm clock, and then a music streaming app. Concord released and died in the span of 2 weeks. It seems like Sonic Team is actually being provided with enough time and resources to make the games that people like. And the Game Awards nominees were wild this year. Such a crazy spread of games with an out of left field Game of the Year. Webfishing is just as much about fishing as it is about drawing Garfield on every surface you find and losing all the money you got from fishing on scratch-off tickets. For a game that emphasizes polished movement to the extent that it does, Pepper Grinder really doesn't give you much time to explore it. This is the exact type of game that needs to be shamelessly copying Celeste's homework. I enjoyed my time with the game, but I feel like I would have loved it that much more if we got bonus levels after the final level that really pushed the mechanic to its limits. I sound like I'm hating, but when my one complaint is that I want more, I think you're in a pretty good spot. The actual action of grinding through terrain feels incredible, and I think the levels that are there do a pretty great job at riffing on that idea. Despite the list of things I think Life is Strange True Colors could have done better, I definitely see it as a step up from the last game. Life is Strange 2's problem was that it never lingered on side characters long enough for me to care about them. So that game essentially had 2 characters. Life is Strange 1 wasn't cool because of the superpowers, it was cool because the characters in charge of these superpowers were 2 high school kids. Interspersing high school drama with the literal weight of the world is a great concept. True Colors remembers that. It zooms in on the characters again, gives them depth, and it rediscovers where the interesting part of Life is Strange is. The person who has the superpowers and how it affects their life and relationships. Return of the Obra Dinn is good. Strawberry Jam goes so far above and beyond the expectations of a mod that I hesitate to even call it that. So many new assets were designed for this, as well as completely new mechanics, and it comes together really nicely. I won't say there weren't levels that I disliked. There were, the gimmicky ones especially overstayed their welcome, but that's also to say there's a lot of content here. Some bad, yes, but if anything, that just shines a brighter light on the incredibly good. There's a nice gradient of challenge here too, starting at a pleasant, mild romp and ramping up to the stuff you need to take time off work to grind through. It's a colossal collaboration wrapped in a cohesive, polished presentation. A game does not necessarily have to be good for me to like it way too much. Danganronpa sucks. The writing is captivating, but it spends a lot of time also not being that. The concept of Danganronpa games is so inherently interesting that saying Danganronpa 3 kept me hooked may not sound substantial, but it equally fumbles this concept as it does triumph with its intrigue. There is so much downtime where just nothing is happening. As fun as the writing feels at times, it also often comes off as grossly self-indulgent. Fan service is used to a point where it starts feeling more like it's for the people writing it than anyone else. It's writer's service. But at the end of the day, I can't help but love it. Danganronpa rules, and it sucks. Mario Wonder was like throwing a lifeboat to a sea of Mario fans drowning in generic 2D platformers. I don't know what changed at Nintendo HQ, but I'm happy it did. Mario 2D platformers have been stuck in a loop using the same renders, the same style, the same level design for a decade and a half. It was charming the first couple times, but I think we could have pivoted a while ago. Mario Wonder feels fresh. They could have just done the art direction change and I would still be stoked on the game, but they've done so much more with this. They understand that the landscape has changed. People are doing new things with the genre. A few more of the new super games and it might have started feeling like Call of Duty, like it's this contract they've signed with themselves. A change in scenery alone was enough, but this game takes on the immense pressure of doing something drastically new each level. In the arcade era, the race for the high score was just a motivator to giving the machine one more quarter. The allure of those impossibly high numbers at the top pushing you to give it another try was what made arcades profitable. Some arcade games had endings, but nothing beat that rush of knowing you were the best Burger Time player in that Chuck E. Cheese. Scores have stayed around since then, but they haven't felt meaningful since the social aspect of arcades. Balatro recenters its gameplay around the score, more so than even arcade games. Getting a big number in Balatro isn't a byproduct, it's the goal. And the process of getting that big number is fine-tuned to perfection, starting with small, quantifiable goals and progressively increasing, making sure not to lose you in the extra zeros. I think originality is a factor so hard to truly achieve, I hardly even consider it when discussing a video game. Everybody takes inspiration from the greats that came before. Resident Evil 4 or Doom, Mario or Zelda, Dark Souls or Dark Souls. Soccer was actually just a Pong ripoff. At times, the medium feels so iterative that it seems a lot more limiting than it actually is. Like all the good ideas have been taken. And then I play a game like Thumper. Thumper is one of the few games that I straight up can't think of anything to compare it to. The gameplay is about as strange and alien as it looks, with a few loose genres to apply to it. Rhythm, horror, action, all three technically apply, but feel insufficient to actually describe what you're about to experience. I think the closest is rhythm, but even that feels like a technicality. While you are trying to stay in rhythm, you're hardly playing to music. It's more like a death march. Where most rhythm games get their challenge from just making you press more buttons in less time, Thumper tries to lose you in the time signatures. It messes with you, it obscures the beat with more noise and psychedelic visuals. This game is short. I finished my playthrough in like 6 hours, and it still was more memorable than a lot of games that I spent like 40 to 50 hours in. Because Thumper is weird and unsettling, and I love it. Living in an age of polish and lots of risk-averse game design, going back to play the first Dark Souls feels like attempting to cross a bridge that hasn't been up to code in 30 years. This game was a test of will and patience for me, one I'm frankly shocked I came out the other side having actually finished. A lot of the times I was getting frustrated at a section, I would close the game and say, I'm done. I'm never playing this game ever again, only to open it the next day and keep playing like nothing happened, because while the cracks in this game are obvious, the stuff that works makes it worth it. I was one of the few people who accidentally killed the weapon upgrader after giving him the large ember, meaning I played through the entire game with weapons maxing out at level 5. That may not seem so bad until you find out that with the item he died with, I could have eventually gotten my weapon to level 15. A process that is intended to be scaled alongside the course of the game, so by the end of the game, I was really working to finish those bosses. This game has no mercy on you, and usually if I'm playing a game that feels like it's trying to make me mad, I'll just put it down. But unfortunately, Dark Souls is actually really good, and a lot of my appreciation for Dark Souls came with time. I started this game 3 years ago and stopped because I thought the weapons felt sluggish and unresponsive, only to fall in love this time with the weighty satisfaction of each swing. There were some great games that released this year. Rivals of Aether 2 actually brings something unique to the platform fighters table, not being afraid of wearing its inspirations on its sleeve while still offering unique mechanics. Lethal Company has not stopped being funny.
All together now, all together now, all together now, all together. Ooh, lollipop.
That's a mine.
Ooh, I got you guys.
Warhammer Space Marine 2 had a great campaign. Sea of Stars was pretty and fun for a bit, but didn't do enough with the semi-turn-based fights for me. Buckshot Roulette and Liar's Bar were great online games. Hoverflow was a cool take on CS Surf, and Helldivers 2.
Hey Ben, be careful.
Oh, okay.
The fear that arose in me at the announcement of a remake to Resident Evil 4 didn't necessarily stem from the fear that they were going to make a bad game called Resident Evil 4. It was more a worry that it wouldn't feel like Resident Evil 4. There was so much the original nailed, so much that if they changed, it might not feel right. And for me, it all came down to one moment at the start of the game that told me if they were going a different direction or if they were staying true to the spirit of the original game. And that is the opening village sequence.
Where's everyone going? Bingo?
Okay, I think we're in the clear. In the original game, this fight was such an explosive introduction to the emergent gameplay. Even on repeat playthroughs, I experienced this fight differently every time. And somehow, I think the remake multiplies that. I died like 5 times in this opening sequence, and with each retry I was finding more approaches, more loot, different cinematic sequences, figuring out more about the fighting mechanics. It's an incredibly honest recreation of the level while somehow evolving it further. The parry feels like a huge risk, changing a fundamental part about the combat, where the original was more punishing if you let them get close. And even more of a shift, they let you move a little bit while you shoot. FPS games are all about move and shoot. Resident Evil 4 is more about move and shoot. A huge part of what made Resident Evil 4's combat so unique was the simple fact that you couldn't shoot while you were moving. It was such a center point of gameplay that you used the left stick for both aiming and moving. Holding a button would prime your weapon. It basically separated the gunfights into 2 states of gameplay: positioning and aiming. And it was cool. It makes fights grounded, it provides more interesting decision making. I really think that's an important aspect of the original. And I think even though you can move while aiming in the remake, it's slow enough and it ruins your accuracy enough that it preserves that pacing of combat. I really wish I could come up with something more interesting than just, this game is really good, but it just is. The moment-to-moment gunfights, the bosses, they've not only turned Ashley into an actual character in the story, but one I would really like to see again. The pacing is unbelievable, taking you through this roller coaster adventure through so many memorable locations. The music, the voice acting is properly corny and over the top. When I started Resi 4 Remake, I thought the biggest compliment I would give this game was that it lived up to the expectations. I didn't even consider it exceeding them.